Welcome back. I trust you've had a restful weekend, and I hope you've been enjoying the international break. We are only 5 days away from FPL coming back. Thus, I thought I would make a different style of video, one which I think could really help you going forward. Now, a slight disclaimer, there is only 3 weeks of information, thus the sample size is small. Therefore, it's very difficult to accurately project every single thing anyway, but especially when you only have 3 weeks. Today, that's what I'm going to be trying to do. I'm going to be taking you through my observations and learnings of all the 20 teams, having looked at a fair amount of football this weekend, and essentially trying to help you plan, because I think that's something I've been looking at recently, just planning my team and looking at all the different paths I can go down. And having this set of information alongside, I think is really, really helpful. So if you do enjoy it, consider subscribing. And there's 50% off right now on Fantasy Football Hub. So at £3.25, it presents brilliant value. I mean, fixture tickers, price prediction tools, which can save your season on its own. You've got team reveals from some of the world's best, Ben Crellin, Rich Clark, Abdul Rahman, etc., right? So if you haven't already subscribed and the 50% offer will run out soon, do go and check it out. And if you don't win your mini league, you get your money back. It's practically a bulletproof offer. Really, really strongly do consider it, because it will go back to full price quite soon. And apart from that, let's get into the video. Right now, for the most part, it is being done in alphabetical order. However, here, I do have Crystal Palace to start with. Now, why is that? It's because I would like to speak about a specific theory, which we're going to come on to with Eze. And that theory is going to be something that definitely has some significance across a wide variety of these teams, hence why I thought I'd start with Palace. Their defensive numbers haven't been great, and nor have the returns for those who started with Henderson, who is largely the template keeper. From what I've seen, I do think this is more of a systematic issue as opposed to the personnel. I still think that the players they've got are good enough to be keeping clean sheets, but at times I do find their pivot getting really isolated on the pitch from what I've seen. I do find at times that there's a certain disconnect between the 10s and then the rest of the team, whereas when you defend with a traditional 4, your wingers, they really help and coming back and doubling up with the fullback to prevent their wingers hurting you. However, with the 10s, I think they have such a interesting role whereby there's already width covered from the wing backs, and the only real thing they need to do is cover the central areas. However, the distance between the two lines, I guess, between the pivot and 10s is so big that I think it can be hard for them to cover. And that's where I think a lot of the defensive issues are stemming from, the fact that they're not really able to sustain real pressure within the mid block, as opposed to some of the other teams. Like you look at Chelsea, right? And Chelsea created a good amount of chances against them in the pockets, in central spaces, because even when they had numerical superiority, it's only because they have a 3 at the back and they're forced quite far back. And then you get good teams, right, with good players and who can operate in those little pockets and small spaces, and they will hurt you if you're going to allow them to come up the pitch so much. So I think defending in this manner, you probably want to have a destroyer next to Wharton. I know Decore is now back, so hopefully from a Palace standpoint, it improves. But I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on, especially when Anderson's there. Now, this proximity theory really stemmed from Eze, especially the first game of the season against Brentford. What I noticed about him is he's not loitering too much in different areas. And when we run through the preview, I'll put some heat maps up. He's really dominating that left half space zone. And the other thing is not like other people are coming into his zone and it's very fluid. He kind of just dominates that, playing behind the striker, playing close to the striker, not having to come back as much as maybe you would expect another number 10 in a different system. And I think being in close proximity to goal is now becoming a really good way to assess players. You look at Son, right, and as good of a player as he is, we're only focused on output, really. So when he does play on the left wing, the volume of actions which are likely output producing are certainly minimized. Whereas I think when you put Eze in this zone constantly, alongside his quality, he's always going to have a chance to return because he takes a high volume of shots anyway. Got the passing in small spaces in the locker. He's creative, got good ball striking, etc., right? So when looking to assess an asset, I would really look at where they're playing, and arguably you just want someone as central as possible, as close to the box. And now that may sound simple, but in an era where I think sides are certainly becoming a little bit more fluid, especially with their positional sense, some of them, I think this is definitely something to keep an eye out for. And it's something we're going to discuss when we come on to Cole Palmer, how it can become a little bit more complex and it's not easy science. But going back to him, I don't actually love the fixtures for the fact that I do think Leicester could cause Palace some problems defensively. When you don't have the ball and you're being caused problems defensively, it's going to hamper your attack in some way. I'm also not sold on Palace yet, just given the quality of performances that I've seen. I think Everton away could definitely become a harder game if Branthwaite's back. Obviously, Liverpool's Liverpool, and Forest have looked good defensively thus far anyway. So, with that in mind, I don't think these are the best fixtures ever. However, at 6.9 and having all the fundamentals on lock, right, like position, zonal influence, penalties, pieces, volume of shots, quality, etc., right, and how Palace platform him within this side, I think he's probably too good to ignore. Albeit, I'm not setting my sights too high with him. I'm just getting him mainly because I think he's such a safe option. So yeah, that's just something I wanted to touch on with Eze because I don't think he's this game-breaking asset. I do think, however, he's good. And I thought I'd just talk about proximity first and about Palace's defense a little. Right, moving on. Let's start with Arsenal next. Now, Havertz and Saka have taken complete dominion over, I would say, the most important parts of Arsenal's attack. A lot runs through Saka, not just from the creative department in terms of the passing aspects of it, but also when it comes to the transitional threat, when he carries, a lot of switches are going to Saka, and then he's taking his fullback on one-on-one a lot, as opposed to Martinelli, who's not doing that as much, or even Trossard when he played. So with that in mind, I think you're just going to see Saka get a high volume of actions in really good areas, as opposed to last season where you probably saw him a bit wider. And I do think, especially combined with his goal striking, that will really help his goal threat. Havertz is the 9, game in, game out, controlling that zone close to the centre backs. I mean, he's running in behind a lot, and he's just occupying them constantly throughout the game. And thus, I think these two will have real dominion over their output. And I don't necessarily expect it to slow down. The only reason I guess you would avoid is if you think that they won't hit the heights of a Salah and other assets, essentially with the ceilings. That I think can be argued either way, but I think you've got a really, really good floor there. What could hamper their ceilings, I do think a little, is the rest of the team, specifically the midfield. I haven't been too impressed with the dynamic there. I don't think Odegaard has helped them out too much, especially given he's in that deeper role. And you've got Rice at left centre mid, which is fine, but I think it's less fine when you have Partey at 6, because now you have a real issue in terms of athleticism. I think personally, I don't think Odegaard's the strongest nor the biggest threat in transition. Then you've got Partey, who's obviously aging and whose legs are slightly gone. And I don't think they can get from back to front as quick as they would have liked. And it allows teams to restructure. And against Arsenal, they're going to be defending pretty deep anyway. So with that in mind, I wouldn't be surprised to see Arsenal struggle maybe a little bit. And specifically Havertz and Saka have their ceiling chopped off a little bit until this dynamic gets sorted. And this is just something I would consider. And then naturally, you don't have Rice, right, for the North London derby. So how did their clean sheet probabilities go? Well, they probably go down. And also, if you're attacking less, as Mourinho said, you're going to be defending more. And I think that obviously would just have an impact on their clean sheet. So until they sort this dynamic, is definitely something I would watch out for. It's something I noticed against Villa, that Brighton first half, even before Rice got sent off, was something I really noticed. And I was like, I don't love this. Brentford, I think, look, if you're going to get defensive asset, you should probably go for Flecken because he has such a high ceiling. They concede enough shots and enough chances, whereby, similar to Sels, there's a high volume of saves there available for you. And I think that could be brilliant for Flecken owners. It at least provides him with a really high ceiling. Make sure a low floor because they can concede a few in the game. But I think you take the upside. I love Mbeumo as an asset from what I've seen. We could wax lyrical about him for ages. He's got all the fundamentals nailed down. He's like the Brentford version of Eze. I'd argue I'd put him ahead of Eze. Sure, he has City this week, but after that, I'd put him ahead of Eze. And then Johan Wissa is a player I've liked for a while. I think he also does a very good job of connecting play, but also being able to find himself in those final moments and arrives really well, which some players can't do as well as him. And thus, I do think his output will actually be okay. So I think what we learned from Brentford in particular, that these two could be set and forget for a while, especially when the fixture run turns. And the defense has improved a little, so they will be okay. They'll get some clean sheets, and Flecken's still got a high ceiling. So with regards to Morgan Rogers, I think what we've seen is that in the bigger games, he will certainly have some progressive responsibility and quite a bit, just taking the ball and carrying it, as opposed to Villa using their passing networks to get up the pitch. That will take away from his output. But we've bought him for this run of games where the fixtures are better, so you can rely more on their passing networks and general build-up to get Villa up the pitch and to create chances. I think one thing we saw against Leicester is even though the progressive responsibility had diminished, he still wasn't getting in the positions and running off Watkins as much as you would like. And he maybe doesn't have that sixth sense of where to be, when to be in and around the box. You look at John Duran when he comes on, right? That is a real striker with a striker's instinct. And I think Roger could certainly profit off learning that. Now, he's had 2 weeks with Emery, giving us the international break. And I think that would really help him, especially now that he's more established within the league and he'll learn his role a little bit better. So I think this is just a wait and see at 5 million after these 3 fixtures. But I wouldn't set your sights too high. It's just something to note that we are going to have to see an improvement in terms of his efficiency, because I don't think the volume of him getting in those positions is going to increase massively over the next 3 games. Watkins, I'm pretty sure, will regain his floor and become a very consistent asset again. Sure, he's got this injury, which I think they're really just managing his load as opposed to a serious one. But maybe game week 5, I could see him becoming a good asset yet again. The left back spot is nice in the side, whether it be Dino or Maatsen. And if there is ever a point in the season, given their system, I think this will be a nice inroads into one of them. And lastly, there's obviously been a lot of transfers in for Onana this week, and I think stylistically he's very different to Douglas Luiz. Hence, I wouldn't really be looking at bringing him in. I think he's just a different player. We can go into that for a while, but it's not really necessary. I just think for FPL, he doesn't have the skill set that Douglas Luiz had, which probably made him a better asset. Penalties, just the one, and it wasn't something I'm thinking about. Also open play, and Douglas Luiz has set piece. Right? So I would persist with Rodgers, but definitely keep an eye. Overall, I really like what I see, not just in terms of football, but also FPL. I really like the fact that their manager's 31. I find it incredibly impressive. The attacking philosophy is still there, and I think what Tony Bloom's done is really impressive. What he's essentially trying to do is create a culture and sustain it regardless of who comes in or out. Just maybe really put the importance on the club and getting what they're trying to do, similar to how an old school Man United was run, as opposed to, shifting from philosophy to philosophy depending on the manager, rather the culture dictates. And yeah, sure, Hertzler and De Zerbi have their differences. Of course, I think Hertzler still got that attacking philosophy. He's just less crazy than De Zerbi and less risky, although I am a big De Zerbi fan. As of late, they are capable of beating pretty much anyone. I mean, they can cause the big team problems, and they can obviously dismantle the lesser sides because they have a wide variety of weapons in their arsenal. So I think fixtures-wise, they're somewhat fixture-proof. And then you look at João Pedro's fixtures, right? And they're not that good on paper, but I think he'll be fine for those reasons. Great value. I mean, expected minutes are there, penalties are there, positioning's there. I don't love him in the 10 because I don't actually think he's been accumulating that many chances. But with the fact that he gets minutes and 9s, I think it offsets it to an extent. I wonder if they'll always have that problem of spread of output where Inters, your Welbecks, your Matomas, your Routers off the bench, João Pedro himself, and maybe even this like secondary 6. So that is something I consider. But if they ever do find their goal scoring form, like really find it, like for example we saw against Everton, if they can sustain that in the games that they have against the lesser sides, then I think even a double up could be warranted at their price because they present such good value and the football they're playing is so good. So yeah, I'm all for the João Pedro pick, and I think even looking at like a mint Homer, definitely something that should be on. The last thing I would say is that they're definitely tightened up defensively a little bit. When you look at De Zerbi, the game model was so risky. I think their game model where they build with like a 3-1 as opposed to a 2-2 box, and the method in which they do it is far more risk averse. So I think in that sense, you're more likely to be getting clean sheets. Hence, another reason why I like the Fleckenberg rotation. Now, as the bottom line reads, unless you have strong conviction in one of the Chelsea assets, Palmer aside, I don't think I'd go there. You look at the likes of Madueke, and yeah, he definitely could have had a brace against Palace, but I still want to see a sustained period of attacking out with good expectations, especially when the price point and just that slot in the midfield is so competitive. Jackson, I don't think still has replicated, not so much replicated his form in the Spain, completely different environment, but he's never really shown us that he can go through a period of good finishing, and thus I think he'll always hurt himself a little bit on the bonus point system, and he's going to limit you in terms of your ceiling. But really, the only option for me is Palmer. I think he looks really good. I imagine the fact that he dropped out the England just to manage his injury load. He's playing a very interesting and good role in the sense that he's playing at the top of the midfield box. He has so many options as a result of the system. Left to his right in front of him. He can run off Jackson because Jackson definitely drops in a little and leverages his link play. So yeah, I only have good things to say about Cole Palmer. And I do think that this is the type of risk that actually works, especially when all of the fundamentals, including proximity, because when Chelsea are high up the pitch, sure, he'll drop in a little bit as well, but he'll still find himself in those pockets. Thus, I only have good things to say about him. Now, with regards to these three sides, I would say I certainly have less information and less of an opinion on all of them compared to some of the others like Chelsea. Everton obviously haven't had a very good start to the season. I think they're missing Brantwaite and Onana big time. I think when they come back, however, then they'll become a better side, and it's much easier for us to get an accurate prediction of what they're going to do in the future. The common theme, I think, here is that all of their attacks are actually okay. And they've all got pretty decent fixtures coming up, right? For a Vardy, a Delap, a DCL, I think they could all be potential options should you wish to go down this route. I would say that DCL is probably my preference, given I think Everton's build-up and chance creation has still been okay. At least he was okay against Bournemouth. One thing I do like about, or one thing I've noticed about McKenna is I don't think he's as adamant of playing in a certain way compared to other managers. There is some flexibility there. And with that in mind, I don't think he'll be one of those guys to go away to like a really big side and really try his luck. I think he'll be a little bit more sensible in his approach. Thus, I don't think they're going to be the whipping boys of the season. I don't really think there'll be a whipping boy apart from if Southampton continue to play in this way. Similar to Everton, attacking prospects look decent. They've got some decent players. And they're probably the hardest team to judge anyway because they've had Liverpool and City. For me, it's pretty much a wait and see there. Leicester, I like their attack at home. I think they're going to be a little bit dangerous. They've caused Villa and Spurs genuine problems for a decent amount of time within the game. And I think if they're going to do it to two of the better sides, they'll do it quite a bit. So when you go there, I don't think you can expect a clean sheet. So that's something to keep in mind with their assets. Defensively, I mean, Steve Cooper's definitely one whose philosophy aligns with the defensive approach against the bigger teams, I think, to an extent. I like that. It's just whether he can execute that with his level of coaching and the level of performance that comes out of the players. And if they do, then yeah, they could be actually quite solid and quite an annoying team to play against. But I think the likelihood is that they'll lose most of those big games. They'll concede 2 or 3, but not get blown away. Somewhat similar to Ipswich, just by a different. So when I'm looking at my own moves this week, a lot of the moves that I've suggested by models, for example, lead to me selling Emil Smith-Rowe this week. However, even against Ipswich, I went and watched the highlights. He was still popping up in good positions. I know I saw some talk on the timeline about his positioning, and then I went and watched him myself at the extended highlights, and I was quite happy, actually, to be honest. He's still getting in those positions. He's still getting the opportunities. He's in and around the box. He's in the right places to get goals, and I think he will. I think in the next 2 home games, he'll definitely get chances at least. And he's averaging 5 points a game at 5.5 million. Great, like, yeah. So for me, I think he can keep going. I wonder if there'll be a side which is a little bit of a homebody. I've noticed that where they have to transition, they do struggle a little bit. I think mainly that's a personnel thing, aside from a coaching thing, just the crisp passing that you need. Brentford show that excellently in the first game of the season. So at home, when you have to do less of that, and you dominate the ball a bit more, and more standards method of chance creation of 10 years ago, I do think they'll do a bit better. So given the next 2 games at home, I like Smith-Rowe. I like Muniz as well. I think he's been accumulating a good volume of chances. He's genuinely a sound footballer. He has a lot of good things going for him. So I'm actually quite bullish on Fulham in terms of their goal scoring in the next 2 games, considering the opposition. And then Robinson, I've talked about him a lot. Love owning him. Brilliant athleticism. Can go up and down that flank all game. Goes outside Iwobi, goes inside Iwobi, underlaps, overlaps. He always had a good delivery on him. One thing I noticed with him, really good delivery. He had, I think, an assist for Muniz last year in Blank Gaming 29 when he put it on a plate for him against Spurs, and I was like, yeah, this guy's good. I've seen him many times before. So I think at 4.5, 4.6, you just keep him for a while and look to continue with him. Overall, regardless of Fulham's results, I think in FPL they'll be pretty. Now, as you can see, this is a little bit of a long one. Okay. Because I do think that they're the team to really talk about, and to be honest, it makes sense, right? Out of the big teams, they've had a managerial change. Sure, so have Chelsea, but I think they've had a slightly different start to Liverpool, whereas Liverpool started really. There's a lot to pick apart here. We'll start with the defense. I really like the fact that these narrower fullbacks with a pivot in front that isn't so jumpy, I would say. They don't leave space and they don't leave their centre-backs isolated and in awkward positions. Neither do their full-backs by the style of press or having them really wide or forcing the centre-backs to have really difficult passing sequences, etc., right? I think that really helps them because they're not getting dragged into these channels where they would with other forwards this time last season under Klopp, and I think that really helps for their clean sheet potentials because they're just not going to concede as many high quality chances. The block is more compact. If you look at their press against United, right, they don't go and aggressively press the centre backs and try and win the ball there. They try and win it in the second line of United's build up for the sixes, and that just allows you to keep everything more compact. You don't have to step everything up, and you don't really want to step up the last line anyway when you press. So that's always going to lead to more space should you do that. And given they're not, it's good for their chances of not being played through, which is definitely something that's happened in the past with Liverpool. So I think that's good. Slot talked about Trent actually getting on the outside a little bit more compared to like his prior systems. Now that he's dealing with a world-class creator and the greatest creative fullback we've ever seen, in my opinion, graced the game. So with that, I think he's only going to get better. I think even if you look at the game against United, he actually got into the advanced areas quite a bit. They probably took their foot off the gas a little bit after the 60. Had they not, I think you would have got even more chances to return for you. But yeah, I think he's going to be really good. And there's a haul coming. There's a haul coming. Salah versus Haaland is definitely something we'll touch in the preview again because they went bar for bar again. But he has been different, and I still don't think my analysis was necessarily wrong on him. I didn't expect, however, this level of ruthlessness, efficiency. Every attacking action is so quick. It looks so dangerous as a result of that, not just in terms of football, but also in terms of FPL. So I think when you're looking at him as a non-owner, because we're not selling, right? As a non-owner, you're projecting whether he can keep up the same level of efficiency as opposed to the chance volume increasing. Because I think when UCL comes into play, they get a bit more tired. Their squad isn't too deep either, especially with the fact that this midfield requires a lot of legs, etc., right? I don't think that their volume of chance creation up massively. And if it does, I do think it'll be a result of Nunes really finding his tune within the side. So it's whether you can see himself keeping this level of efficiency up or even increasing it or it decreasing. Jota and Diaz, I would be still a little bit cautious of. Gakpo and Nunes will be banging on the door, especially with more games. And there's a lot of games this season, clubs, especially in the Champions League. So I think I'd still probably avoid them. Like, you can get their upside elsewhere. Salah's, yeah, you can't, and that's why he's 12-5. But you can get these guys upside elsewhere. Like, sure, Diaz has started super hot. I don't think he'll maintain this with the expected minutes. And Jota, a bunch of players have got more points than him. So with that in mind, I think Salah, Trent, Robbo, or nothing for me personally. But overall, they look really, really solid. I think Forest will actually be a decent test for them. We'll come on to them because they've performed pretty decently in both departments so far. I think if they blow them out of the water, then I'm going to really change my stance and I might really restructure my team to getting them. But I would like to see him just do it once more against the Forest side because I don't think they've had a particularly difficult test, especially with how United played so far. City and Haaland I've spoken about a lot, and I've spoken about the system a lot, so I'm not going to do that again. He's just brilliant, and I think he's just going to score a lot of goals. If you want to see what I have to say about City, I'll probably touch on it more in the preview. But yeah, new system, wide threat increase, Rico in the pockets, Diamond in midfield, De Bruyne behind him as opposed to Foden. Not so much ball striking, but more creation, solely focused around getting the ball to him in the end, etc., etc. And he looks fitter and healthier, and he seems sharper, and he said that himself. I don't really think Foden should get back into this side. I don't think he's better than Savio in this system on the right wing. I don't think he's better than De Bruyne as a 10. I don't think it's worth playing De Bruyne and Foden together when you already have so much creativity in the side. Plus, you don't really need to imbalance things. So that's just something to think about if you're looking at going there. Rico Lewis popping up in those right-hand side pockets, somewhat similar to Porro to an extent, I think looks really dangerous. What are his expected minutes like, and what can we take from those first 3 weeks? Well, he's not going to play every game, right? He's still really young. He's like 19. And his body's not overly robust for the league, considering his size. I think, like, you know, if he takes a knock, it's going to hurt a bit more than Sandro Tonali takes a knock. So with that in mind, I think he'll definitely use Walker in games and tweak the system against left wingers that offer a lot of threat in behind. But I would still like to have him as part of maybe as my fourth defender, rotating with my third, just for the upside in games such as Brentford, where I don't think Sharda will play. I actually think Newcastle haven't been as bad as people have said. I think maybe the final pass has been lacking in their midfield, and maybe their finishing could be a bit better. But apart from that, they've been okay. I think Tonali will help because he helps in a lot of different aspects for a football team. His performance against France was quite impressive. And again, he did a lot of different things, whether the stuff off the ball or helping in earlier phases, helping with build-up, switches of play, helping in the slightly smaller spaces out the pitch. Not that that's his expertise, but he's still okay at it. I do think Isak's actually looked pretty sharp, and the chances are going to come for him. They've nearly been there for him. The final pass has been a bit poor. He's not also been super clinical. Against Bournemouth, he definitely could have had another one. They had 10 men against Southampton. Spurs are a decent team. So yeah, I do think that the Tonali coming back will be quite a big thing for them. I do think that Isak's actually going to do quite well. I think the game models that Wolves use definitely suit Isak. So I don't really like selling him. That's what I'm trying to say. And yeah, some of this is a gut feeling that I think they're going to get better, and some of it is logic based. And I thought I'd just put that across in the form of what I think Tonali is going to do, and the fact that other teams will have a higher load management in terms of Europe, and their squad's of a decent size now, given a lot of players are fit. So just something to consider if you're looking at selling Isak. Gordon, however, I don't like the fact that Barnes is getting that left wing spot. I think on the right wing, he's just not as good on the left wing, and I do think his output could suffer as a result. So something to. I thought they were really, really poor against Liverpool. I thought the approach from Ten Hag was really poor, and I think that shows you that there's still a lot of issues there. Bruno's the one we really need to focus on, right? Opposite to Brighton and Werner, I think he's been platformed really poorly. Either he's just too deep to get output because they have build-up problems, or he's too close to the goal, back towards the goal. Huge reliance on Kobe in the middle to sort their creativity issues out. Sure, Casemiro is quite a direct passer, but maybe not of the quality that you need in the Premier League at the moment. So for me, sure, you're going to keep him against Southampton, but I think you can dump him pretty soon after because, yeah, sure, he might get one return, but the likelihood of him getting two in the game, I think, is pretty small, and you're paying 8.5, and that's the big thing and why I think he becomes such a difficult one to justify. I think against the sides that press them high and just actually press them high like Bournemouth, I think those are the better games for him because he'll get more transitional opportunities in a side that's really built for that. But like the games where they have to break someone down consistently, I'm not too sure. Like, yeah, he'll have a high volume of actions, but will it be in the spots on the pitch you want it? I'm not too sure. So I would just be very, very cautious before bringing a Man United asset. Probably just wouldn't do that, including the defense, because I think there's a little too many chances. You can never really trust them. I'm going to start with Wolves here because there is one player I'd really like to talk about, and that is Matthias Cunha. I think he could be such a good asset at 6'5". I mean, penalties, super high involvement in all their actions, real quality. I mean, he was a player I picked out from early when I saw him that I was like, okay, this guy can play football. I really, really like him as an option. If you're looking at getting another forward that's not João Pedro, that's relatively cheap, maybe not this week, but after, and then you bench him for City, etc., right? But yeah, I do like him. I think that they're a little bit similar to Bournemouth. I do think that you can get through them a little bit too much, similar to West Ham as well, but just in a different way. I would say that they have more quality, attacking quality. I think Aït-Nouri off the left, he's a defender. Strand Larsen Cunha is probably a little bit better than what Bournemouth have in Semenyo and Van Lissen. But I do think that Iraola is probably a better coach. Wolves will concede some goals. But similar to Bournemouth, I have a similar perspective of how I think their games could go. But that does make Cunha, I think, a very solid asset. So something to note down the line, especially if you're looking at wildcarding in 6. Southampton, I mean, they've actually recruited, I think, pretty well with Chukwu, Archer, Burton, Diaz. And if they can get them playing, I think, yeah, then they can become a decent side. But if they're insistent on playing out the back in this manner with the centre-backs they have, and I do mean that with the greatest respect, they're just going to concede goals because the amount of turnovers high up the pitch will be too many to not get through a game without conceding a big chance. Forest have been probably the most interesting side outside of the top 8. I mean, for FPL. Defensively, they look decent. First statement you may think is weird. Their structure is pretty good. Like Nuno is a good defensive coach, but I have noticed that actual quality and individual bits of quality can get at them a little bit and is a good way of breaking them down quite quickly, right? You can say that about any system, but I do think it's particularly prominent here. So I do think away at Liverpool, I'm probably slightly less bullish after my watching of them from a defensive standpoint. Morgan Gibbs-White's open play goal threat is still not really there, but Chris Woods is definitely there. I mean, he's accumulating a lot of chances. Forest have had the most shots in the league, and a large reason of that is, I think, him. He has complete dominion of that space, almost like Havertz, but in a different way. And I think he's almost got this role nailed down now, and he won't see less than 75. We're not seeing the Awoniyi that we've seen in the past. So I think you could actually hold him for a very long period of time, and he's good on the bonus system. Thus, I think he's one of the better options. Finally, we have these two. Now, the only real reason West Ham assets haven't been talked about too much is because of the fixtures, and that's still a bit of an issue for them. However, when they do turn, or if you're looking at going for them anyway, I do like how consistent Bowen's performance has been, how his goal threat is still there pretty much throughout any game and in any conditions. I don't, however, like how many goals they seem to be conceding and likely to concede. You can get through them really easily and play through their block, which is not something that you really want, especially in the modern day with how much quality there is in the league. And that too, it's not a game model which is heavy transition based where you're like, okay, well, I can accept that, like an old Liverpool model or a Bournemouth model right now. It's not that. I do think their midfield is a little bit imbalanced with the way Paquetá is used. So that's just something to know. I do think you can get at them defensively, and there's definitely goals to be had against them. But I do like Bowen. Going on to Spurs, I mean, Porro playing in this right-hand side 10-light role at times, close to the striker, in that midfield, high volume of shots, technical quality to produce in the final third. Great. I really like that, and I think he could be one from Game Week 5 who's a set and forget. Even though the fixture are okay, they're nothing great, they're decent, and they don't keep too many clean sheets. With his upside at 5.5, I think it's quite justifiable. If it was 6, I think we could have more of a conversation, but at 5.5, I think he's a really good option. Son's just so much better at 9 than left wing. He's turned into a bit of a touchline winger at left wing. Something I spoke about with, say, the output producing actions, they massively decline in that area. Whereas at 9, a player of his quality, he only really needs one chance. And the other thing I've noticed is he's been fantastic, absolutely fantastic on the baseline for BPS. He got a bonus point against Newcastle in a game where there were 3 goals without a single attack and return. And even against Leicester, his BPS baseline was really good. So was it against Everton. That's something I would consider. If you're buying him, you get that upside. And I just think Romero is going to score goals from headers because similar to Gabriel, he's a monster in the air. So that is all for me with regards to this video. Look, I could have made that video about 10 hours long, and we could have gone into the deepest dives. I did want to give you just a Reader's Digest version, just some of my observations from my watchings, which there have been a decent amount this weekend, and where I think some of the more important assets within FPL stand. It's not so much a footballing review, it may seem like that, but I was doing it solely for the FPL assets. This is my team. I'm pretty happy with the start. I think 229 to start with is pretty solid. And again, if you would like to sign up to Fantasy Football Hub, 50% off and your money back if you don't win your mini. I hope you've enjoyed and found that useful. If you have, please subscribe. Please like the video and comment. I would love to have a discussion with you in the comments about whatever you would like fantasy football related. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I shall see you very soon for a video. Again, if you did enjoy it, please do subscribe. And apart from that, I shall see you very soon. Goodbye.